excellent.
Let me ask you a crazy question. Could you poison your customers and your company still survive? I know that's a crazy question. I'll say it again. Could you poison your customers and your company still survive? Take a moment, think about it. I'm serious. See, that may seem like an extreme question and one that most of us would answer, well, absolutely not. But that's exactly what happened in 1982 with Tylenol. They experienced one of the most terrifying product crises in history. 7 people died after taking cyanide-laced Tylenol capsules. It was a full-blown nightmare for the company and all of the country because people died and then panic spread. Stores were rushing to take Tylenol off of their shelves, and understandably, trust in the brand absolutely shattered. Now, most companies wouldn't have survived it, but Johnson & Johnson did more than survive. They still exist today, and many of you are still taking Tylenol. See, they were able to rebuild trust, they were able to protect their reputation, and honestly became a case study in how we lead through a crisis. So today, we're talking about how to navigate communication in crisis. When things go wrong, your words and your actions, they matter more than ever. So we want to discover navigating this difficulty and communicating through it. But stick with me because I'm going to give you 3 simple questions and then 3 action steps that can help you rebuild trust with your audience, strengthen your brand, and come back even bigger and better than ever. So welcome to the Mind Your Business podcast, the podcast for whatever business is on your mind. Let's get started.
Well, that's excellent.
Well, thank you for joining me for another episode of the Mind Your Business podcast. To all of you who are part of this, every episode, I want to say thank you. For all of you who are new for the first time, thank you for joining us. And as always, if this adds value, will you do me a favor? Like, subscribe, share, leave a review. This helps me add as much value to as many people as possible. So here's the backstory. Here's what happened with Johnson & Johnson and with Tylenol. Someone purchased bottles of Tylenol. They laced the capsules with potassium cyanide. They put the pills back in the bottle. They returned the bottles to the store shelves, and this was in the Chicago area. And then these random bottles were purchased, the pills were taken, and then 7 people died. Now, the scariest part of all of this was that no one knew how many bottles had been contaminated or where in the country all of the bottles were located. Now, think about that level of fear for just a moment. Think about that level of panic. You're thinking, I took Tylenol today. Did I take one that was contaminated? We have Tylenol in our house. I mean, you begin to think about this level of chaos and this level of fear. It was so bad that people didn't just stop buying Tylenol. They were afraid to take any over-the-counter medication at all. They wouldn't take any brand. But this is what's amazing, and this is a part of what I want us to learn from today. I want us to learn from the response by Johnson & Johnson. See, their response wasn't just operational, it was intentional. They didn't hide behind lawyers and legal talk. They didn't try to spin it. They communicated fast, openly, and honestly, and with integrity. And they didn't just talk about it either. This is what's amazing. They pulled 31 million bottles from store shelves. Now think about that 31 million bottles off the store shelves that they were going to sell cost the company over $100 million. They then issued a public safety warning. They stopped all of the advertising for Tylenol, and within weeks, they began redesigning their bottles, and they began to include that tamper evidence seal that we all know that's inside medicine bottles today. That's where it came from this incident. So not only were they pulling the product from the shelves, losing revenue, but they're spending money to redesign the bottles that would go back to store shelves. Absolutely incredible. Now, I believe their response is what saved the company, because this story could have certainly ended differently. Of all the things that they did right, here's what I think is the most crucial. They asked the right questions internally before saying a word externally. They got together on the inside before they said a word publicly. And that's what we're going to break down today. But here ultimately is what they really did. They asked the right questions internally before saying a word externally. And that's what we're going to break down today. So let's explore 3 powerful questions that you can ask in order to turn a crisis into a comeback. So question number 1, what would you want to hear from us right now? This is the first question I want you to consider before even communicating with your customers. What would you want to hear from us right now? See, this is the empathy test, and Johnson & Johnson passed this one with flying colors. See, they didn't just communicate with corporate speak. They didn't defend themselves. They thought like parents, like patients, and like people. So instead of downplaying the situation, they said, stop taking Tylenol immediately. They warned people against their own product. And that's unheard of in most boardrooms, but it was the exact message that the public needed to hear. See, most companies want to respond with something like, we're aware of an issue and we're investigating. And the translation of that is, we don't have any answers, but we needed to say something. The translation is, we don't want to tell you that our product is dangerous and we don't want to lose revenue by pulling it from the shelf, so we're going to delay in our response. But what people want to hear is we see what went wrong. Here's what we're going to do to fix it. Here is what we are actively doing to fix it. We care about the people that this has affected. See, when you're in a crisis, you have to start with the audience's fear, not your reputation. And ask yourself, what is it that they are worried about? What do they need us to do so that they can feel safe again? See, surveys show that 63% of people, they will trust your brand more if you communicate quickly, openly, and honestly after a crisis. But most people, they want to pull back out of fear. What if we lose the sale? What if we lose our customers? What if it destroys our brand? So we withhold information or we do a poor job navigating the crisis that we're in. But your customers say, in the majority, they will trust you more if you just communicate honestly and openly and do it quickly. So if you want to earn trust, you need to put their needs first. So let me give you a practical strategy here. Before you draft your response to whatever the chaos is that you're dealing with, I want you to get feedback from the people who are the closest to your customers. Get feedback from people around you who are the closest to your customers. So this could be your frontline staff, it could be support reps, or even social media managers. And ask the question, what are we hearing right now? What questions or concerns are people repeating? You need to know what it is that your customers are saying. Look, data is great, but dialogue is better. You've got to go beyond market research and sales numbers and pre-orders. All those metrics that you have in that moment in crisis mode really doesn't matter. Have people see what your audience is saying. Have them get the tone or the pulse of your audience. They can do that by checking comments on Reddit. They can read the comments or replies on your social media post. You could develop an advisory panel that are made of real customers that represent your base. Ask for their input and get their feedback. See, the goal here is to get out of your own head and to get into the head of your customer, to see how they think, not just how you think. To get out of your world and get into the world of your customer. See, it's not about what you want to say. It's about what they need to hear. You have to speak to them and do not speak at them. So do the research to find out what they need to hear from you. And then question number 2, ask, how does this message make you feel? How does this message make you feel? Facts are important. Absolutely. You need the facts. And people want facts. But feelings are also an opportunity to build trust. Feelings are also an opportunity to break their trust. See, people don't always remember what it is that you said, but they will remember how it made them feel. In the moment, as you are giving facts and you're throwing out information and you're trying to navigate this crisis and you're trying to maintain your reputation, people are listening to how you say what you say through the lens of their feelings. And that's why you need to communicate in such an important way. See, Johnson & Johnson didn't just say, we're investigating. No, they showed genuine concern for how their customers were feeling. And people felt like the company cared more about their lives than liability. And that is powerful. But see, companies don't always think about their response and how it will make a person feel. I can remember when a reporter asked Tim Cook if he would consider opening up iMessage communication to Android users, because this reporter said he wanted to be able to text with his mom. And Tim Cook just said, well, buy your mom an iPhone. And to me, that was the most arrogant response, because Tim, not everyone wants an iPhone. There you are interacting with a reporter and a customer who is just asking for a feature so that he could communicate with his mom. Tim could have said anything he wanted to say, even if he was never intending, which they had to, but even if he was never intending to open up iMessage to Android users, he had an opportunity to speak to the emotion of a customer. This happened recently with Nintendo. Nintendo recently released their Nintendo Switch 2, a console that Nintendo fans were super excited about until it actually happened. Now, there's several reasons that fans were upset. It was mishandled, a lot of disappointment. But one of the major things was the price. The launch price was just a lot more than people were expecting. And then a lot of people communicated that very vocally to Nintendo. But instead of speaking to and addressing the feelings of their customers, the CEO just basically said, if you can't afford it, well, just play the old one. And see, that rubbed a lot of people the wrong way. They said, we are your loyal customers. We're the ones who support this company and make it successful. And there was no even thought about the way people felt about what was supposed to be exciting, but was a huge letdown for many of their customers. See, the truth is, emotions, they are powerful. That's why movies, television, media, songs, that's why all of these things are so powerful, because they all pull at the heartstrings. It tugs at the emotions. And if you can speak to the emotions of the people that you serve, you can capture their heart. And then you speak to how they feel. It's powerful. So here's a practical strategy that I want to give you. Just like with question 1, I want to encourage you to get some internal feedback from the people who actually talk to your customers. They know the customer's language, they know what the customers care about, and they know what's most likely to help. So you've got to get out of the boardroom and you've got to get right there with the people, and you've got to know what is going to help. And then test your message with a small group of actual customers before going public. Now, I know your initial response may not be able to do this, but as quickly as you can to get the pulse of your people, it's better to make a mistake internally before going outside externally and giving that message to the public. You can think of this like the dress rehearsal before the big performance, and just ask them, how does this response make you feel? And if the answer that they give is a little nervous or cold, or if they seem confused, well, then you just know to go back to the drawing board. And then question 3, does this sound sincere or does this sound tone deaf? Does this sound like I'm speaking to their emotions and to their feelings, or does this sound like Tim Cook and go buy your mom an iPhone? See, this is possibly the most important question that you may ask, because this one is your final filter. Tone-deaf messaging usually happens when people in suits write the response. They're often written out of a legal lens, not emotional, not connecting to the people, having no idea what they're feeling or what they're saying or what they're thinking. They're just speaking in legal talk. But sincerity comes when you invite people who can think about what people want to hear and how people feel. And Johnson & Johnson, they didn't just listen to lawyers. And I know, listen, there were a lot of lawyers involved in this scenario, but they listened to the people. They brought in crisis experts, consumer advocates, and then they communicated like their reputation depended on it. Because here's the reality, it did. They admitted what they knew, they owned what they didn't, and then they followed up with clear and concrete actions. The true difference maker is that their sincerity came through not only in what they said, but so important, in what they did. So here's your practical strategy here. Ask yourself this question, and this is so powerful. This is so sobering in a moment of crisis. If my family was affected, would this message be enough? When you make it personal and you put yourself in the shoes of your customers or the people that you serve, and you ask, if this were my family, if these were my friends, if these were my people and they were affected, would my response be enough? Get feedback from all of those who are around you. Get people with different perspectives, get people with different personalities, and ask this question. And when you read the statement for feedback, don't just pay attention to their words and what they say back to you, but get their facial expressions. Notice their pauses. Get their gut reactions. Because if they hesitate or if they squint or say something like, well, it sounds okay, I guess, well, that's your cue to try again. Because I want to encourage you here, and this is helpful. Sincerity doesn't mean that it's perfect. Sincerity doesn't mean that it's just this perfect, well-crafted statement. It just means that it's real. It just means that it's honest. It just means that it comes from a sincere place of your heart. Now, the reality is that you may never face a crisis on a scale like Tylenol. I hope you never face one at all. But the truth is that your credibility is always one bad day away from being tested. You're just one moment away from a crisis that is going to test your organization. So let me give you what I'm calling a communication toolkit. This is from everything that we've talked about today, and this will help you build a plan and be prepared just in case, so you can get ahead of the crisis in case it were to happen. The first thing I would say here is build a crisis team. Build a crisis team. Go ahead and gather the people around that you need in case of a moment of crisis. Don't wait till you're under fire. Don't wait till the building is burning down. Do it ahead of time. You can include PR people, legal people, your leadership team, frontline reps, but make sure you have someone with emotional intelligence too who will tell the truth. Because the benefit of having this team in place is that you're already ahead of the crisis just in case if or when it happens and you're not playing catch up. So get every person that you would want to have sitting at the table in whatever crisis that you are imagining happening in your organization. Who would you want at the table? And go ahead and gather them ahead of time. And then number two, I would encourage you and your team of people, draft a first response template. Draft a first response template. So go ahead and create just a variety of just short, honest messages that you can adapt in any crisis that may happen. So it may be something like, we're aware of the situation, we're investigating, our top priority is the safety and well-being of those affected, and we'll share more updates as we learn more. So you're recognizing that there's a problem. You letting people know that you're looking, you're investigating, you're digging for answers and more information. You've let them know that your priority is them. You put the attention, the focus on them and not yourself. And you've also communicated that as soon as something happens, you're going to release more information so they know that they're going to hear from you again. You could say something like, our top priority is the safety and well-being of everyone affected. So here's what we've done so far, and we'll share more updates as we learn more. Or just simply say, we're sorry, we missed the mark. We hear your feedback, and here is what we're going to do to address it. See, if you've already crafted or created these statements, then you can increase your response time in the event of a crisis. You're not sitting at a table trying to figure out who needs to be in the room because you've already got that team gathered. And then you're not having to go, what can we say? How can we address it? You may have to adjust your message. You may have to narrow in your focus just a little bit right there in the moment, but you at least have a template to start with so you can quickly address the people that matter the most, and that is your customers. Then number three, here's what I would say, role play. Role play. Get your team together, get your responses, and get all of this information together, and then role play. Pick a hypothetical crisis. Walk your team through these three questions that we've discussed today, and this is going to help your team learn to develop a crisis response mindset. So it's going to get their mind in the right place through a variety of whatever scenarios that you play out. And as you talk through these scenarios, as you respond, someone may say, oh, that doesn't sound like us. That doesn't come off the way that we intend for it to, or that doesn't align with our values. We don't feel our customers, by what we see and by what we hear them say, are going to respond well to this response. So it gives you an opportunity, again, to make a mistake internally before you take the message externally. And that is an asset for you. The number 4, you define your metrics. As you're navigating this crisis response, you need to define the metrics. Every crisis is a classroom. It's an opportunity to learn. So it's important to document what worked and what didn't. Basically, the question is, how do you know if you're winning or if you're losing? So you need metrics, just like you measure other things in your organization. You need metrics to know if your responses are working in the middle of a crisis. So predefine some metrics that you're going to measure in order to determine the success of your response. Look, mistakes happen. That's just a part of leading. It's a part of running a business. And at some point, something will go sideways. A decision will backfire, and a message that you thought was well-crafted, it just won't land. You're going to disappoint someone, somewhere, anywhere. But here's the bottom line. When things go wrong, people don't just want facts. They want honesty, they want empathy, and they want to know that you are human. But here's the truth. Your mistake isn't the end of the story. The crisis that you're in, it isn't the end of the story. It's the beginning of a new opportunity. Mistakes happen. That's just a part of leading. It's just a part of running the business. We said it. But how you communicate in those moments are what makes or breaks your reputation. Because in these moments, people aren't just watching what you do. They're listening for who you are. So ask yourself, when you have trouble, if you've navigated these waters before, do you show up with a spin or do you show up with sincerity? Do you hide behind silence or do you lean in with humility to say, we missed it, we're working on it, we're going to do better? Johnson & Johnson, this story could have gone a very different way. They could have gone quiet during the crisis. They could have blamed someone else or even minimized the damage. But instead, they put people above product and profit. And because of that, they didn't just survive a tragedy. They became a case study in how to lead through one. So this is the takeaway today. When you're scrambling to figure out what's right, remember it's never wrong to do the right thing. So don't scramble for perfect words. Just speak from your values. Connect with the people that matter the most. Start with empathy. Stay rooted in truth and never underestimate the power of a clear, honest voice in a moment of chaos. So thanks for joining me today for another episode of the Mind Your Business podcast. And hey, if this has been valuable, will you like, subscribe, share, leave a review? This helps us add as much value to as many people as possible. And until next time, go mind your business, and I'll see you on the next episode of the Mind Your Business podcast.